What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, it's Monday, so you know what time it is. It's time for a mock draft. Before we do get into the video, though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which running back had the most amount of rush attempts on third down. The correct answer, Le'Veon Bell. Today's stat of the day, which two running backs led the league in red zone fumbles? So they tied, and there was two running backs that led the league in red zone fumbles. Let us know who you think those players are in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, if you're interested in purchasing our draft package, more information can be found on that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Get yourself eligible for some giveaways. We're just giving away a Deontay Johnson signed jersey for the month of May. I'm recording this before May's over, so I'm not sure who won yet, but stay tuned for that. That's enough about that, though. Let's get right into the video. Alright guys, we're back, we're here, we're doing a mock draft on Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard, drafting against bots. It's a 12-team, half PPR league from the 5 spot. My preferred pick, if you had to ask me what's one spot you want to draft at, I would take the 5th spot. I'll get into exactly why as we get into the early stages of the draft. But for now, if it's Draft Wizard, as you know, we're not going to be competing against other humans. But right now, it's the most accurate ADP that we can have that most mirrors what we're going to see by draft day. The other platforms that do have live people drafting on them, the ADP is super wonky, and the team that you get is not going to accurately depict anything of what you would actually see on draft day. So for that reason, just to add into that, I'm not going to take any players that fall to me at extreme values, because I don't think that in your competitive leagues, and if you're watching this video, to be honest, you probably take fantasy football a little serious. So we do want to give you the best advice in taking players that are outlierish type of values. It's not going to help anybody, so I'll avoid those if we run into them, but that's to be determined. But right now, we're going to start our draft. I did say I like the 5 spot for a certain reason, and it really comes down to the players that are in that tier 1. So the first 6 players we have in tier 1, you'll see them coming off the board right now. So far we have McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Michael Thomas, all tier 1 players for us. Michael Thomas, the only actual wide receiver in tier 1 that we have for obvious reason. But then next in the 5th spot, I love having the choice between Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. Now Dalvin Cook on a per game basis destroyed Alvin Kamara last year, but Alvin Kamara essentially played at his floor. Alvin Kamara also is on an offense that I trust more, being led by Drew Brees. He did take a bit of a downgrade when you compare the production that he had under Teddy Bridgewater to what we were expecting to see and what he had shown us leading up to that under Drew Brees. Now, don't forget, one thing, a lot of people are a little skittish on Alvin Kamara this year because he did play so poorly, but don't forget, heading into last season, he was a top 3 choice. It was between Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and Alvin Kamara, and there were honestly cases for each one of those players to go first overall. Now Alvin Kamara is falling behind players like Dalvin Cook. I love Dalvin Cook. Like I said, he's still in that tier 1. But with Alvin Kamara, you know what you're going to get, and you know you're most likely going to get a full healthy season. So I'm going to take him over Dalvin Cook there, and that's going to end tier 1. The reason I don't have Derrick Henry in tier 1 is the lack of receiving upside. He's not going to be a player like Alvin Kamara who's never rushed for 1,000 rushing yards. Believe it or not, he's gotten most of his work done in the receiving game, and that's very valuable for fantasy. This is obviously a half PPR draft. So Alvin Kamara is the first player on my team. Very happy with that choice. Next round, I do prefer to go wide receiver here. We're going to go to our draft board, see who got taken, and after us, Derrick Henry, we spoke about him. Joe Mixon, I love Joe Mixon, especially if we can see some increased production from this offense, at least on a consistent basis with Joe Burrow, something we're not usually typically expecting from rookie production. So it's not like I'm boosting him really high. He does have the upside of being one of these tier 1 types of running backs, but although he did play well last season, we do have to take that into account, that the offense has a lot of question marks, a lot of upside when you think about AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, you have Auden Tate, a lot of talented receivers out there, but until they can put it together, he's still going to be outside of this tier 1. Josh Jacobs, another player similarly to Derrick Henry, who's not going to be getting that receiving upside. So I'm not a huge fan of him that early, but I do still love having him on my team as my RB2, as my RB1 doesn't feel as good. 2 tight ends got taken in the 2nd round. Still too early for tight end for me. I think this is a really deep tight end year when it comes to what you can expect from the back end of the tight end ones. So between tight end 8 through tight end 12, the potential streaming options that we have are immense this season. Typically, we're cycling between 4 or 5. I think there's going to be 8 to 10 tight ends we can cycle through on the waiver wire, as long as we're not competing with too many other people in our leagues that are also trying to do the tight end streaming method as well. So my picks up, I have Alvin Kamara. I do prefer to have a wide receiver receiver here with only Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Hill, Julio Jones, and Hopkins out there. That leaves us a lot of options. Now, Chris Godwin is the obvious choice. There is a level of risk that comes with taking Chris Godwin, though. You have to understand the chemistry when a new quarterback joins a team. The receivers, we're not sure how long it's going to take them to get on the same page. I wouldn't be surprised if week 1 Chris Godwin comes out and posts 130 yards, 10 receptions, 2 touchdowns, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they kind of have a rocky start. And for your wide receiver 1, it is going to be somewhat of a risk, but I think by the end of the year, Chris Godwin's going to be fine, and I don't think because of the talent he's going to be the type of player to really hurt your team for an extended period of time. So I'm definitely taking Chris Godwin here. If I did want to take a more safe approach, I would be interested in Kenny Golladay. If I was going to look for a running back, let's see who we would take here. So there's Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette. I really don't see a running back difference maker between these two. I don't think Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette, none of these guys are really highly targeted players for me. So not really guys I'm interested in. Todd Gurley is still in a void for me right now. So let's see who falls back to me. I do have a somewhat shorter time span between when my pick is. Todd Gurley's still here. Chris Carson as your RB2. Phenomenal. He should post RB1 type numbers to start the season. I love having Allen Robinson here. Adam Thielen. These are really great receivers to choose from. Adam Thielen has more safety than players like Juju Smith-Schuster and DJ Moore. Speaking of DJ Moore, he now has a new quarterback, and we just talked about what the risk factors are associated with that with Chris Godwin. Well, the same's going to go with DJ Moore, and while he did produce wide receiver 1 numbers, high-end wide receiver 1 numbers for Michael Thomas while he was the quarterback of the Saints, we can't necessarily expect that same result as he transitions over to Carolina. It's a different offense. We haven't seen the type of talent outside of Michael Thomas succeed in an offense led by Teddy Bridgewater. From a fantasy perspective, DJ Moore is the type of talent to be able to overcome that, but are we going to see it early enough to make us feel comfortable in our pick of DJ Moore in our early 3rd round? I don't think so, because we're already taking a risk on selecting Chris Godwin. While Chris Godwin's safe from a year-long perspective, it could be a rocky start. Taking another dive at a similar player who could take some time adjusting with a new quarterback is something I don't want to have to deal with both of my first wide receivers. So how about taking a player who I know is going to be involved in his offense, and that's Adam Thielen, who should see even potentially more targets than he'd seen throughout his entire career with Kirk Cousins. That's a potential. Justin Jefferson, mainly a slot receiver. Adam Thielen played better from the slot from a fantasy perspective throughout his career, but it's too early to say. They could bump Justin Jefferson outside more. Adam Thielen has played outside as well, and when he does play outside, he didn't have quite the same upside as Stephon Diggs playing in that role, but he still did perform very, very well for fantasy. So having him as that baseline of safety at my wide receiver 2 spot is going to be super valuable. And the running backs that are going to fall to me after this, I'm fine with missing out on Chris Carson, who would be definitely the lead pick at the running back position for me here. So I'm just going to take Adam Thielen. I have a long way to get back to me. Hope I get Chris Carson. If not, I'm still interested in Le'Veon Bell in the 4th round. I know Bell's kind of gross, but I do value the volume there. Okay, so I just drafted Adam Thielen, and let's see who we got. So DJ Moore gone. Juju Smith-Schuster. Do love Juju Smith-Schuster. Calvin Ridley is still here. Wow. And Chris Carson's here. So this is where we get to the point in the video where I told you I'm not going to take these extreme values. I think I'm going to avoid both Calvin Ridley and Chris Carson to make this team more accurate, because clearly Calvin Ridley's not going to fall in your draft. I'm not going to take him. I'm not going to take the value at Chris Carson. It's funny that 2 of the players I selected on the safest picks in the draft are 2 of the ones that fell. But we do have Le'Veon Bell here. I did mention him as a potential option. I love DJ Chark, DK Metcalf, winning Stephon Diggs. So let's take a look at the roster and see how we are looking. So we have Alvin Kamara, Chris Godwin, Adam Thielen. Definitely want to start to get a running back in here, and I am going to go Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell averaged pitiful efficiency last year, under 4 yards per carry. He did get a massive amount of volume. The stat of the day. Answer, who received the most amount of rush attempts on 3rd down? That's Le'Veon Bell. You're not setting your running back up for much success if you're handing the ball mostly on 3rd down. And let's be honest, with Sam Darnold, these were 3rd and longs, but there are reasons to believe that the offense can be much improved from a season ago. They are an offense that's trending upwards. Sam Darnold, towards the tail end of the season, was actually a quarterback sleeper that you could put in your lineup. I always like to target players who are coming off of really down years, whose roles are very secure and safe. Le'Veon Bell, while he's not a target, he's still a player that can fill that role for you, who may not have immense upside, but it's hard to imagine Frank Gore pushing him for touches while he is healthy. Also, keep in mind, Le'Veon Bell did have a full year off. What running back, and especially one rumored to have ballooned up like Le'Veon Bell, is going to come back back in full force in a new environment, a new team, learn a new offense after a year off, and still expect that top level production, that's a really bad bet to take. So for Le'Veon Bell to have success last year was more of a reach, but now he's fallen several rounds. Le'Veon Bell was a borderline first round pick last year. He's nothing close to that right now. I'm getting him in the 4th round, and you know you're getting guaranteed volume. The fact that they brought in Frank Gore only makes me more confident in his role in the offense. Still a solid pass catcher, a lot of room to improve from a season ago. Remember, avoiding Chris Carson because I don't think he would actually be there in realistic drafts. I also would take David Montgomery here. If Bell wasn't here, I would probably take David Montgomery here. I know it's early based on what the computer suggests for you to take, but again, David Montgomery is one of those players I do feel as we get closer to the draft, his ADP is going to launch higher. Tight ends available, Zach Ertz. Lower on Zach Ertz than in previous years, wouldn't consider him, and there's no really other tight ends that would even interest me in this range. So let's grab Le'Veon Bell. I can definitely get David Montgomery here. Ideally, let's see what wide receivers here. DJ Chark, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin. These are 3 other names I would definitely consider in this range. But the fact is, you guys, you're not going to get RB value with guaranteed volume after this stage of the draft. As soon as David Montgomery is gone, let's take a look at the running backs that you can guarantee volume from. So you have David Montgomery. James Conner, can you really guarantee his volume? Not really. Who has the highest upside? Definitely James Conner. A much better offense under Big Ben, but they haven't been really confident in his abilities and giving him the touches. It's still a situation where we're choosing between good options here, and David Montgomery is the safest to me out of these 3. The other guaranteed volume I see past him, Raheem Mostert, can't guarantee his volume. He also is not used in the receiving game whatsoever. This is a half PPR draft, so we do value those receptions. Kareem Hunt is a guy we can guarantee his volume. He outpaced Nick Chubb in many performances as soon as he was the starter, and that trend could definitely continue. Sony Michel, he's another player who does have guaranteed volume, but the value of the touches between Sony Michel and a player like James Conner are completely different. You give Sony Michel 10 carries and 4 receptions versus what you give James Conner 10 carries and 4 receptions. James Conner is going to smash that. He's a better pass catching running back, and it's an offense that should open up more opportunities for James Conner. How are you going to stack the box against Big Ben, especially Big Ben at home? Sony Michel can get the box stacked on him in the entire season. So while I do love the volume, we could run into a situation where 14 touches only nets him 50 yards and he's not getting any touchdowns, and the next thing you know, you're scoring under 10 fantasy points. Everyone after David Montgomery, James Conner, and David Johnson, they're not guaranteeing any volume, so we're going to secure that volume while we can. David Montgomery, welcome to the team, and we have a long ways to wait for our next pick. This is the stage of the draft where you should start to take a peek at the quarterback position. I'm seeing Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and Lamar Jackson. Deshaun Watson does scare me a little bit. Deshaun Watson could be a player who could have top 3 type fantasy finish by the end of the season because he's going to have to do a lot of the work on himself. I would expect his rushing production to come up, trying to make plays out of nothing, but the wheels could also fall out. And remember, he's had his fair share of injuries in the past. Putting all that type of pressure on a player who's injury prone could lead to some negative things. There we saw Russell Wilson also being drafted. Dak Prescott, wow. Dak Prescott definitely should have been taken before these players. Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, I'm not seeing any players I would reach for in the quarterback department when we have been tracking quarterbacks taken early versus wide receivers being taken early and comparing them to their late round pick counterparts. You guys have been liking the teams better that have been taking quarterbacks early, so it wouldn't surprise me if I did take Dak Prescott here, if at the end of the day, you guys did agree that my team looked better. But I'm going to take a look at receiver again. I will definitely take a look at running back as well. So I do see Kareem Hunt here. I would love to get him. He's the only one I would really consider. Sony Michel's also somebody in consideration. Jarvis Landry, he's not a player I've been targeting. He did actually perform better while Kareem Hunt was on the field. It's a very surprising stat to see, but from a fantasy points perspective, it's a fact. I'm not going to be taking him here, so let's take a look at some of our other options. We have Marquise Brown. I like him. Will Fuller, definitely a bunch of upside there, but right now we do have to value some safety here, only having 2 receivers. Let's take a look at the running back, though. I think the winner by far, though, has to be the Kareem Hunt pick. The wide receivers here, Stephon Diggs and Jarvis Landry, are in the higher tier than the other players. Let's just hope a wide receiver falls back to me after I'm taking Kareem Hunt. So we'll take a look at that. And then I'm also going to take a peek at tight end. And we have Julian Edelman, Jarvis Landry, and Stephon Diggs came off the board. So 2 players I wasn't really going to draft. These 2 players, Stephon Diggs and Julian Edelman, not really touching them. I could get the player I was most interested in at this level, which would be Marquise Brown. He doesn't really have immense upside when you think of a volume perspective, but he does have a safe role in the offense, and we've seen in limited volume, he doesn't need a ton to produce for your team. So I'm going to take Marquise Brown here, but I do also really like Deontay Johnson. Where's Deontay Johnson? He's coming off way later, so Deontay Johnson, I doubt is going to have any risk of falling back to me at my next pick. So let's try to shore up two positions here. I'm going to get Marquise Brown, and then hopefully on the wraparound get Deontay Johnson, and that should fill up the starters for my wide receiver and running back position, and I can really start to get these high upside guys that may not be guaranteed that they're having volume in their offense, but if things go their way, they could be complete game changers. So for now, Marquise Brown, welcome to the squad. And let's see, I will also consider a quarterback again as well, and a tight end, so we'll take a peek at those guys. So we'll do that first before I get Deontay Johnson, since we already know who my pick is going to be. Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry in the 8th round is a lot lower than I've been typically seeing him go, especially in live drafts. I know that Hunter Henry is a very skilled player, and you always want to bet on skill, but I'm not betting on this offense being improved. And while Hunter Henry was a beast while he was in there, he was still injury prone. So to think that you're going to have Hunter Henry for the entire season, it's a sucker's bet. It's not a safe investment. I do not think that the difference in production you can expect from a player like Jared Cook, Hunter Henry, or even some of these later guys like Dallas Goedert, they could very well similarly mirror what you're going to expect to see from Hunter Henry at the end of the season, but you're going to pay half the price. Like I said in the beginning, the tight ends that are going to end up ranking from like 8 to 12, tight end 8 through the tight end 12, there's going to be a lot of names in that hat. So a lot of streaming options that you can consider. I'll name some off to you that are going around tight end 20. I mean, Chris Herndon, tight end 22. There's been a lot of buzz in the Jets camp about Chris Herndon. We didn't see it last year, so fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me situation there. But Jack Doyle, he's another player getting receptions from Phillip Rivers. Would it surprise you if Jack Doyle's in that tight end 8 through 12 conversation when it comes to volume on an offense led by Phillip Rivers, who has consistently targeted the tight end? Think Antonio Gates, think Hunter Henry, and you can get him for free. You can probably take him up off the waiver wire. So there's a lot of players on here who could definitely surprise you. Johnny Smith, another name. Dallas Goedert, guaranteed to be in that conversation. So I don't see the need to get Hunter Henry, who could also disappoint in a sense where he could play down. He's being drafted as the tight end 6, but I could definitely see him playing down to the tight end 8 through 12 and then factor in that injury factor, and it's an easy avoid for me at that price. So the quarterbacks we have here, Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, Aaron Rodgers, very similar players here. I would love to get Matthew Stafford on my team. I think he's coming in at the best bang for your buck, because Matthew Stafford's going to potentially produce, if he does anything like he did last season with the same weapons in an offense which he should be more accustomed to. Would you be surprised if he plays it as a top 6 type of quarterback? No, you shouldn't be, because that's what he did last season. The only difference is he's not getting valued anywhere near that. And is Matthew Stafford injury prone? No, he's not. So the injury discount we're getting on him is pretty fantastic. The only downside I'd say is he's not really rushing the ball a ton, so you're not going to have that baseline of skill. So if the wheels do fall off in some of those tougher matchups, he does play Minnesota and he does also play Chicago twice, 2 defenses that have the potential to shut him down. So if the wheels do fall off in those passing games where he's getting absolutely nothing done in that area, he's going to have some bad games. But we really didn't see him hit those lows in his short time in 2019 playing. So I'm still going to trust him. So I'm going to wait off on these guys and draft the wide receiver I wanted the most, which was Deontay Johnson. Very undervalued. Let's take a look at where we are. 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers: Alvin Kamara, Le'Veon Bell, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt. I like that. Chris Godwin, Adam Thielen, Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson. For me, the player right now is going to be Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton is on an ascending offense with a quarterback who's now pushing to be a top 12. He's in that conversation. The best connection that he had with a receiver on that team consistently last season was Darius Slayton, especially down the stretch. The receivers on that team are getting older, aka Golden Tate. No saying how much longer he's going to be in the offense or if he can remain healthy. He was banged up last season. And then there's also Evan Engram, who also hasn't proven to be able to stay healthy. Sterling Shepard himself has dealt with his nagging injury. So there is an outcome where Darius Slayton is the top option in this offense by fantasy playoff times. If you tell me Darius Slayton was the top option in the offense, while it's probably not good for New York Giants playoff success, for fantasy, that's going to be very, very valuable. Darius Slayton, an upside player with a secure role in the offense. We may not see the volume come his way early, but it's very possible we do as well. And I do believe that by the end of this season, as we progress towards the fantasy fantasy playoffs, we're going to see that involvement for Darius Slayton continue to rise, which is perfect. We're aligning the performances of our players getting better as we're approaching the playoffs where we need to perform our best. Now, I really do have to consider quarterback. I am considering Carson Wentz here. I wasn't expecting him to fall. He's not an immense value. It's not taking advantage of the system. It probably would be if I drafted Matt Ryan, who is projected to go several rounds earlier. So Carson Wentz, he is more of a risky quarterback when it comes to his injury concerns, but they did add pieces in the offense, and I don't believe Carson Wentz is the type of player to need to have high-level weapons in order to perform for fantasy. He does get it done on the ground, so you can expect some rushing yards, some rushing touchdowns, and he typically can get it done with the pieces around him. The two tight ends he has are some of the best in the league. Between Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, I don't think there is a better two tight end combination in the league, and Carson Wentz is going to take full advantage of that. So I'm going to draft Carson Wentz here. Tony Pollard, Boston Scott, and Chase Edmunds are all on our sleeper list. However, one of these guys is guaranteed to come back to me, and we don't need to take too many of those same types of handcuffs, high upside players. I do like Justin Jefferson, but since I drafted Adam Thielen, not really interested in here. So we can take some shots on wide receiver as well. Allen Lazard, Jalen Reagor, definitely some top options there, but these are projected to be drafted rounds later, so I don't need to worry about them. I'm going to take the upside of Carson Wentz here. Not going to touch Matt Ryan because, again, I feel like that would be taking advantage of the system. Matt Ryan should have been drafted a while ago. While Carson Wentz is still a value at where he's being drafted, it is not uncharacteristic for him to fall this far in the draft, especially in such a deep quarterback draft. So we took Carson Wentz here in the 10th round, back of the 10th round. Tight end, take a peek here. Jared Cook, definitely a good option, but I'm fine streaming the tight end position. Like I said, I like a lot of the later guys, so I am going to grab one of those running backs. Jalen Reagor went, and that disappoints me. Jalen Reagor wasn't expected to go for 1 to 2 rounds later, so I was hoping to get him with my 12th round pick. That didn't happen, so let's get one of these running backs. We have Chase Edmunds, Boston Scott, Zach Moss. I like all of them here. Zach Moss does have a guaranteed role to get volume, but Chase Edmunds, we know, can produce running back 1 numbers if given the opportunity, and it's an offense that we're expecting to score much more touchdowns and be much more fantasy friendly. So if I'm getting running backs, I don't need to value the immediate volume that Zach Moss is going to receive because I already have guaranteed volume from Kamara, Bell, Montgomery, and Kareem Hunt. It's basically everything that I've drafted for was guaranteed volume. So for this, I care nothing about the volume, only about the upside. Chase Edmunds, to me, has by far the most upside. So Chase Edmunds is definitely the pick here, and we move over to the next round. Unfortunately, no Jalen Reagor. Would have been nice to have Reagor with Carson Wentz, that combination, see if that paid off. So after my Chase Edmunds pick, Boston Scott and Zach Moss went immediately after. So those are 4 guys I'm looking for in this stage of the draft, arguably one of the toughest stages of the draft, and that's when you're filling up your bench spot with those upside players, the ones without guaranteed volume. And Tony Pollard, Chase Edmunds, Boston Scott, and Zach Moss are typically my guys. They all got drafted in rounds 10 and 11. I'm glad I was able to get one, arguably one with the most upside. I would say Tony Pollard probably has the most upside, but Chase Edmunds, it's close. It's very close there. Currently, we have 5 running backs and 5 wide receivers. This is a really good split. I'm not interested in taking 2 quarterbacks, even though Carson Wentz is injury prone. I do want to get more of those players with immense upside. I do need 1 more wide receiver. I do need a kicker and a defense and a tight end. So my final 3 picks are going to be tight end, then defense, then kicker. So this is really my final pick as a receiver or a running back. If I were to choose which I should take, it's really up in the air. Typically, I do like to have more running backs than wide receivers on the bench. So overall, just draft more running back heavy. But in this specific roster composition, I definitely feel like my wide receivers are weaker than my running backs. So I am going to take another shot at wide receiver. So I'm going to look for somebody who does have early involvement in the offense, and let's see who we can select. So at the wide receiver position, a couple names that come to mind at this stage are D.D. Westbrook, somebody I would consider. Sammy Watkins, you could consider. But I'm looking at somebody with unknowns to their name, and that's Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is somebody who's immediately going to be second on the team in targets from the receiver position. He performed well in small spurts last season when Aaron Rodgers trusted him. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who was arguably the number 2 heading into that season, performed terribly, and they didn't add any other pieces. So Allen Lazard's involvement is trending upward. The skill that we saw on him, it was good. So for me, it's a no-brainer to take the number 2 in an offense led by Aaron Rodgers, an offense that has in the past supported 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers. Think Jordy Nelson and think Randall Cobb. So Allen Lazard does have the build for that type of production, so he will be the final wide receiver selection I make. Let's see who we can get now at tight end. Fant, to me, though, is the easy selection here on an ascending offense as well, led by Drew Lock, who could potentially take an even greater step forward in his second year. Noah Fant's going to be one of the main beneficiaries with those two talented wide receivers on the outside. Noah Fant should have some mismatches given to him. So he did also lead the league in yards after catch per reception. Shout out stat of the day. So for me, that's a no-brainer. And now let's choose our defense. We'll just go with Buffalo Bills here. Really not all that important. Kicker, I prefer to get the kicker on San Francisco every year, Robbie Gould. But since that's not available, I'm going to go Jake Elliott. Tie that production in with my quarterback. It's really not a big deal. It's a kicker. He's probably going to be dropped after, a few weeks for somebody on the waiver wire. So let's take a look at the team, guys. I didn't take those values that they gave to me, taking Matt Ryan several rounds later than he should have gone, and the receivers that fell to me. I know I went and took players that are targets on my list. Feel very confident with it. I would say the weak point is going to be the receivers outside of Thielen and Godwin, but Thielen and Godwin are two bona fide top 12 guys so long as they're healthy. None of them really have any major risk factors when it comes to injury. Adam Thielen last season was banged up, but he'd never dealt with an injury or missed a game prior to that. Chris Godwin may be shaky to start the season with Tom Brady, but we'll see that improve. Marquise Brown definitely has some signs of improvement. May not have a ton of volume, but again, we're just looking for upside there. Deontay Johnson is the type of player that is going to be involved early and often, and the skill, if you watch some of his highlights from his rookie season, there's a lot to like there. So Darius Slayton, another guy similar to Deontay Johnson. You want to bank on talent, and then Allen Lazard, opportunity meets ability there too. Alvin Kamara, Le'Veon Bell, David Montgomery, and Kareem Hunt. Don't think you get much of a better combination of running back production and potential upside there with these guys. And lastly, Jake Elliott, Carson Wentz at quarterback, got the offensive points as long as the Philadelphia Eagles score. It's a kicker, who cares? And then Buffalo Bills defense to round out the team. But guys, that's going to do it. That's the team. Really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.